Well, hi everyone. This is going to be a segment today that was so popular last year. It was our #1 segment over at BloomerBoomer. So we decided to start off the new year, or at least early on in the new year, with what was so popular last year. And that had to do with where people could live and retire overseas, maybe in some far-off land, maybe in some place that's romantic, maybe an adventure. But in any case, people wanted to know more about places you could retire that might be sort of off the beaten path where you could still have a great life. So the author of that is the same person last year that was so popular, and her name is Kathleen Petticord, and she is founder and publisher of Live and Invest Overseas. And we'll tell you a little bit more information about how you can find out more from her later in the show. But right now we're going to start talking to Kathleen. And first of all, Kathleen, I know a lot's been going on in your life right now, and there's some things that you'll be telling us about here a little bit later. But let's kick off our show today and find out what's the #1 place in your estimation and what you've discovered as a place to retire and to live and be happy.
We have Algarve in the top spot for the 3rd year, and I think, frankly, that the overall lifestyle, the overall picture of what your life could be living in Algarve, Portugal, is really hard to beat. And so to put this list together, we base it on our own firsthand experience, our own experience of the previous year, moving around, spending time and researching these countries, and the personal firsthand experience of our contributors and editors. And it's a conversation. It's not quite a democracy, but everyone gets a vote. And then at the end of the day, my husband and I kind of say, okay, this is what it's going to be. But it is a discussion. It is a debate, sometimes a lively debate. That said, everyone agrees down the line, our correspondents, our contributors, anyone who knows the Algarve or that part of Portugal agrees. It's really, life is kind of as good as it gets. It's a beautiful coastline, great weather, medieval and old world villages, great restaurants, great seafood, great wine, great culture, lots of golf, boating. There's just great health care, and really, really affordable now, especially because of the strong dollar and the weak euro. Europe in general, everywhere that uses the euro, is super, super affordable right now. And so Portugal and the Algarve are benefiting from that. But the cost of living in the Algarve in particular is one of the best budgets, best values, best bargains in Europe in general anyway.
So Kathleen, I understand there's a move in the works. Are you planning to move elsewhere?
We are. We're technically moving back to Paris. We were living in Paris when we moved, and then moved here to Panama City about 8.5 years ago. And so we've been here launching the business, building the business, and now our son is graduating high school this year and going to college. And so that frees us up to kind of position ourselves more in line with where we want to be long term. And so we're repositioning ourselves back to Paris.
Well, it seems you have the most perfect lifestyle, at least for many people, but it also requires maybe someone or a family who's a little bit out of the ordinary.
I think we're kind of unique. I think some people make more than one move, but we moved to Ireland 18 or 19 years ago, then we moved to Paris for 4 years, now we've been in Panama, we're going back to Paris. And the reason we've been in Panama as long as we have been has been to get the business really established and then to wait for our son to graduate school.
How do you go about doing this job you do? Because you could always find perhaps the cheapest place to live, but then who would want to live there? So there must be more to it than just, what's cheap.
One thing that we look for always is we think of it not so much as cheapest places to spend time or retire as best value places. And in our list that we put together historically as well, but looking at this year, we try to represent different budgets. So we do have a couple of places on the list that are for people on very modest fixed income.
Now, cheap isn't always the worst, so give an example of a place that, for lack of a better word, not too expensive.
For example, Kota Kinabalu in Malaysia, you could live there, a single person could live there on $600 to $800 a month, the couple on $1,000 a month. It doesn't get much cheaper than that to live a decent quality, interesting lifestyle.
Of course, cheap is good depending on your lifestyle, but there are many, maybe majority of people who aren't looking just for what's the least amount. Maybe they aren't looking for cheap.
But then not everyone is on a super modest, super tight budget. And so we want to represent choices, as you say, more for a kind of middle class income, and even for someone for whom income and budget isn't a concern. And so obviously Paris fits in that category, but a lot of the places on the list, while you could live very affordably in these places, you could also live bigger with a bigger budget, like Barcelona, for example. Barcelona's, a real city, a real international city in Europe. You could spend way more than the budget figure we represent. And this is true in a number of places. So we really are trying to represent all the different budget agendas.
Yeah, of course, there's the budget agenda, and then there are many of us who want something exceptional, want an adventure.
Some people are up for really exotic. They want a big culture shock. They want big culture change. They want a big adventure at this stage of life. And not everyone has family, children, grandchildren that they want to be able to stay in close contact with and visit regularly. That's not everyone's life. And as well, if someone has a very small budget, again, this part of the world, Southeast Asia, is where you're going to stretch it the farthest. It's increasingly populated by growing expat communities, this part of the world, Southeast Asia, for this reason, because it's just uber cheap, frankly. The expat communities that are established here and growing aren't necessarily populated primarily by Americans, but say by Brits and others from Europe, for example. But Americans are starting to make an impact here, and there's a big opportunity for someone who wants a big outside-the-box exotic adventure on a really small budget. And remember, as we were describing, you can split your time. It doesn't have to be that you're going 12 months a year forever, indefinitely, for the rest of your life to Malaysia, because that's a big leap. But what if you decided, you know what, I'm up for that kind of adventure. I want to spend 3 or 4 months a year in Malaysia or Thailand, say, living on $1,000 a month or less and living a really interesting, fun, cool lifestyle. The money you bank in those few months, the difference between what it costs you to live in Malaysia for 3 or 4 months and what it might cost you to live, say, in Europe, in Algarve, which is on our list, Barcelona, or even Paris, which is on our list this year, that difference just kind of goes into a savings account to help bolster what you have, the nest egg you have for the rest of the year living somewhere not so cheap.
Well, it's a huge decision, and there must be some steps or a process that you can recommend or advise people to take when they're getting ready to make the trip and make this decision of life.
So what I really recommend is, make your list of what's important to you in the new life you're seeking. Identify a short list of destinations that will allow you to embrace that lifestyle on the budget you have. A list of 2, 3, 4, maximum say 5 destinations. Do your research and then go to each one. Prioritize them and go visit. You just have to go visit. I say for a minimum of 2 weeks. If you could go for say 2 months, that would be the best case, because a lot of places, almost anywhere, probably could be great for 2 weeks. It's a honeymoon, it's a holiday, it's a vacation. But beyond that, then real life starts to settle in, and the unfun things, the challenging, frustrating things about the place, they become more apparent as time wears on. So the longer you can stay, up to say 2 months, and go work your way through your list. And even if, the first place, the second place, you decide, this isn't for me, I don't know why anyone would live here, frankly. Okay, fair enough. Worst case, you had a vacation. You had an adventure, you have a story to tell, move on to the next place on your list.
That's a great way to look at it. Now, I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. How much money should I put away? What is typical? Is there a typical budget that I can look for? That must be a really tough one to answer.
Exactly. That's a great insight. And we struggle with this all the time because everyone wants to know a number. How much is it going to cost me to live in Paris or Cayo Belize or fill in the blank wherever you're thinking about going. And the only honest answer sounds like a smart aleck response, but I have no idea how much it's going to cost you to live in that country. It depends on how you want to live. First, it depends not only on the country, but where in the country. So the cost of living in Paris is very different than the cost of living in Pau, which is in the countryside of France, in the south of the country, also on our list this year. And a budget for Paris could be double a budget for living in Pau. And so where exactly in the country? Secondly, what kind of lifestyle are you looking to live? And one important question to answer in this context is, how local are you interested in going? The more local your lifestyle, the cheaper it will be. So you can move to Panama, say Panama City, where we're living, for example, and live a very international standard, even a luxury, bona fide, luxury level lifestyle. That's available in Panama City. To live that lifestyle, it's going to cost you $5,000 to $10,000 a month, just like it would say in Miami. You could live the same caliber of lifestyle, a penthouse ocean view apartment, eating out in 5-star restaurants. You could have a maid, you can have a driver, you can go around in an SUV and have the whole lifestyle, and you pay for it, but it's available. Well, the average salary in Panama City for a Panamanian is about $1,000 a month. Minimum wage is $400 a month. So the average Panamanian isn't living that lifestyle that I just described, but they're living a comfortable lifestyle. They're just living very differently. So they're living not in the frontline ocean view apartments. They're living behind, back off the water in local neighborhoods. They're not shopping in the big US style grocery stores. They're shopping at the fish market or the produce market. Those still exist here in Panama City. They don't have a maid and a driver. They don't have a big brand new SUV. They have a little old Toyota or something. So like anywhere, it's how you choose to live. And I think a good way to think about it when moving to another country is, how comfortable are you going to be living locally? One important thing to realize is, living a local lifestyle means speaking the local language fluently. You couldn't, for example, shop only where Panamanians shop and spend time only among other Panamanians to embrace a cheap local lifestyle if you didn't speak Spanish. So that's a big hurdle in that regard.
There really is something to be said about getting right in the culture and the area where you live. I mean, what better way to experience it? But I'm sure I know there are some drawbacks to that, some compromises, and in fact, after experiencing the true lifestyle, maybe that's not something you want.
And I have friends, good friends here in Panama, a couple of retired, a school teacher and an accountant who have retired here together. And when they came, they retired on our recommendations. When I hear these stories, I get nervous. Someone comes up to me or writes to me and says, Kathleen, I've been reading for years, and on your recommendation, I've moved to Panama. And then I wait for the other shoe to drop for them to say, and oh my gosh, what were you telling me? You were all wrong. But they said, we've moved to Panama, and when we came here, we were committed to going local. We wanted a real local experience. Well, now it's a year later. This is when they first got in touch with me. They've been living here now 5 or 6 years. But after they were here a year, they got in touch and said, now a year later, we realize what that means, and that's not what we want. So they went local. They went into the interior of the country. They had a great adventure. But what they found is, living like a local in the interior of Panama, they lived in a house with no hot water, no air conditioning. They didn't have a car, which meant using taxis and, schlepping your stuff down the street, and it's hot.
Well, who doesn't look for a bargain? Now, I know that you've said earlier that to put an exact dollar figure on a budget is really, really hard to do, but I'm going to ask you that anyway. What kind of a budget should you put together for the number one spot?
For the Algarve, we figure for a couple $1,500, $1,600 a month. And with the caveat that, that's an average budget. You could spend a bit less if you were, going to live very carefully, but you could definitely spend more. But somebody with a budget of $1,500 to $1,600 a month right now, which is almost equal value to the euro. I think it's at $1.06 right now as of today. So it's almost on par. you could live really comfortably in that part of Portugal.
If Portugal has such a romantic attraction, I'm really dying to go there. Well, tell us a little bit about some other gems, or a gem that you really, really love.
We included again this year, and Chiang Mai has been on the list for, I'm trying to find my notes real fast, but I would say for at least the past 3 years we have included Chiang Mai, and it's because it is a really comfortable, interesting, rich place to live on a budget. So it falls again into the budget category along with Kota Kinabalu in Malaysia. The other thing about Chiang Mai that makes it really appealing is that there is an established and growing community of expats here, of other retirees, foreign retirees who've been living here now for years, and so the way is kind of paved. So when we look at Southeast Asia, we're looking for bargains. The strong dollar, the weak euro, is offering what I think is a big opportunity. If someone wants to be in Europe, and Paris is maybe one of the prime examples of wanting that lifestyle, that European classic lifestyle, think about buying a place of your own right now, an apartment, a small apartment, really small even, in Paris, in whatever arrondissement you like and can afford. When the dollar, when the euro's at $1.06, so $1.05, $1.04 it's been at recently, that makes owning in Paris more affordable for an American than it's been in a really long time. It won't be this affordable forever. So if you buy a place of your own right now, a little tiny studio apartment even, or a one-bedroom apartment, something really small, that a lot of retirees could afford, you lock in your housing at today's weak value rate. Then even if you're planning, this works better as a strategy if you're not planning to retire this year, but in 5 years, say, or 7 years, this works really well. Buy a place today with your strong dollar, rent it out. The rental market in Paris is very strong. You'll have no trouble renting out anything decent in any kind of decent location. Rent it out. It's there sitting for you as kind of a retirement plan in a box. Then when you're ready to retire, you show up, you move in, kick your renters out, move in. You have no housing cost. So no matter what the euro is versus the dollar at that point when you finally retire, even a pretty modest retirement budget will still allow you to live in Paris once you've got the housing costs taken care of.
Well, so many people are looking for a bargain, and that's certainly one to keep in mind. As we begin to close out here, Kathleen, can you give us maybe a tip or two about something that maybe we don't know about?
My recommendation for this year is, if you've ever dreamt about living in Europe, figure it out now. The dollar is just so strong. It's so strong around the world. So I make a really strong recommendation for Europe. If that's the lifestyle you want, and you just for your whole life thought you could never afford it, right now, if you can ever afford it, it's going to be right now. So I'd say figure it out. But beyond Europe and the euro, the dollar is very strong everywhere. It's at record high levels against Mexico, in the Mexican peso, the Colombian peso, against the real in Brazil. So really, if you've thought about this idea at all, Europe aside, if you've thought about going overseas at all, 2017 is a big window of opportunity for the currency, if no other reason. If you've got dollars, you have a big advantage in a lot of marketplaces right now.
Well, Kathleen, as always, some awesome ideas. What an inspiration. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Thanks very much for having me back.
Well, thank you so much, Kathleen. You have been an inspiration. Now I want to go to some far-off land for that adventurous lifestyle and retire and just be happy in some foreign land. And it just sounds like a dream life. I'll have to put it off for a few years yet, but it's something I'd love to do. And you can get hold of Kathleen and find out more about her. She has a website, Live and Invest Overseas. That's Kathleen Petticord. You can get more information there. And also you can go to our website at BloomerBoomer.com, and you'll be able to see this show and get more information about Kathleen. Thanks again for joining us. See you next time.